Daily Detroit is brought to you by the community. Support our work at patreon.com/dailydetroit.
Hello and welcome to Your Daily Detroit, the podcast that shares what to know around Southeast Michigan. It's Wednesday, April 1st, 2020. I'm Jer Stays. Later in the show, Sven Gustafson will join me to talk all things cars and autos. Of course, there's big news in response to this coronavirus situation. But first, some headlines. Let's just get right to it. Let's do the numbers. The state of Michigan now has 9,334 confirmed coronavirus cases and 334 deaths. There have been more than 1,700 new cases reported in the last day and 78 additional fatalities. The city of Detroit continues to lead in cases, in part as it's a hotspot and in part as they've rolled out additional testing measures, including a drive-through site at the state fairgrounds. There are nearly 2,500 cases in the city with 82 fatalities. The rest of Wayne County, not including the city, has nearly 2,000 cases and 63 deaths. There are more than 1,900 cases in Oakland County and 99 fatalities, and Macomb County has nearly 1,100 confirmed cases and 51 deaths. Construction of a 900-bed field hospital is underway at the TCF Center in downtown Detroit. The convention hall with 723,000 square feet of exhibit space will also become a FEMA federal medical station. That means it'll be a storehouse of beds, supplies, and medicines. Results released from a survey by the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association shows the massive economic impact so far on the restaurant industry. The survey says that the industry lost about $491 million in sales from March 1st through the 22nd and shed 72,000 jobs. On average, restaurants saw a 43% decline in sales, and 41% of operators have temporarily closed. As a leading indicator of things to come, nearly half of restaurant owners expect to lay off more employees in the next 30 days. A number of Amazon workers have walked out at the Amazon fulfillment facility in Romulus. In a statement, the workers allege that Amazon is not taking proper precautions in the facility and that 3 of their coworkers have contracted COVID-19. Demands include that Amazon immediately shut down the facility for cleaning and send workers home with pay until it is reopened. Additionally, the workers demand more cleaning supplies, expanded health benefits, a reduction in the pace of work. After all, Amazon is notorious for working employees for many hours without a minimum number of breaks, and more transparency around COVID-19 cases at the facility. The action in Michigan comes after a similar event in New York. There, an employee who organized the walkout was fired afterward. Amazon says it was for violating social distancing guidelines, but New York state officials are investigating. In closures, here's one temporary and one permanent to talk about. All 12 national Coney Island locations have been temporarily closed until the crisis passes. There's been no reopening date shared by the company. The regional chain is famous for, well, Coney's, of course, it's in the name, but also for their Hanis chicken pita wrap. And a local movie theater has permanently closed. The AMC Star Southfield at 12 Mile and Northwestern Highway has shown its last film. The theater opened in 1997, and I gotta admit, I remember it well, as the idea was that the design was to harken back to the days of movie palaces. It cost $40 million to build, or $64.5 million in today's money. But Star Southfield, formerly a flagship for the chain, was not kept up like a palace, and over time, maintenance issues led to regular complaints from visitors. Many in-person venues are going to be in flux or in danger of closing, especially those that were on the bubble financially, as it's currently unknown when large gatherings of people will be allowed again. Beyond that, it's expected that the whole idea of going to a movie theater, already under pressure from streaming services and large home TVs, may take a major hit in what some are calling the new normal after the pandemic. Governor Gretchen Whitmer will be holding a televised town hall Thursday night from 7 to 8 p.m. It's unique as it's a collaboration between Fox 2 Detroit, WDIV TV4, WXYZ TV7, and Detroit Public Television. Joining the governor will be the state's chief medical executive, as well as anchors from all 3 major stations. It'll be commercial-free and available to all broadcast television stations in the state, thanks to a collaboration between the Michigan Association of Broadcasters and the Michigan Association of Public Broadcasters. So Sven is joining me on the line from his basement studio in Ferndale. Welcome back to your own podcast, Sven.
So good to be here.
Right? So one of the stories that caught my eye, and I think it's something interesting to follow, especially important and germane to Detroit, is auto sales. That's something that's tracked every month. And we're starting to get some data on what's happening and the beginnings of the impact of this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So April 1st, just say happy April Fool's Day, everybody, by the way. But these numbers are no joke. We're getting like first quarter auto sales numbers in from all the automakers. Some of the automakers, including I think GM, have gone away from reporting their sales numbers every month in favor of just doing quarterly. Nevertheless, you're starting to definitely see the slowdown in auto sales reflected in these numbers, as you would expect. Start with the what we know from the Detroit automakers. GM said its deliveries dropped by 7% during the first quarter, because of the huge slowdown in March in the past few weeks. Nearly all of its models saw year-over-year sales declines from first quarter of last year. Though interestingly, a few bucked the trend. The Chevy Bolt, that's their electric car, small hatchback, actually saw sales rise by 36%, or about 1,500 units. It's still far from being like one of GM's top selling models, however, but a couple of cars that are among their top sellers, the Chevy Silverado and GMC Sierra pickup trucks, also did well. So did the Chevrolet Spark. That's one of its least expensive cars. It's a subcompact hatchback. Actually posted a modest gain, suggesting maybe people are starting to look for value. Meanwhile, Fiat Chrysler said its sales fell 10%. Even the venerable Jeep brand saw sales declines across the board. Every model posted lower numbers. What did do well for FCA, Ram pickup trucks, the Chrysler Pacifica, and Dodge Durango SUV. We still haven't heard sales reports from Ford yet, and we don't know when we're going to hear those. But the news is largely the same, in the rest of the industry as far as what we know so far. Both Hyundai and Volkswagen saw their first quarter sales drops, and both said that just in the month of March alone, their sales fell 40% in the U.S. For each of them. That's a staggering decline. And then even luxury car makers may not be immune. Porsche said that its first quarter sales in the U.S. fell by 20%, suggesting that even well-heeled car buyers may be sitting this one out right now, Jer. I would also just add, Jer, these numbers, looking ahead, are likely to only get worse, frankly, for the second quarter. We don't know, for example, how much longer production is going to be completely shut down. Every auto plant in the United States and most around the world, especially in Europe at least, is currently shut down right now. So we don't know when those factories are going to reopen. And then even when they do, how quickly is demand going to return, from consumers? Because after all, we're looking at, a very likely and possibly very severe economic recession here that is almost certain to hit car makers disproportionately.
So turning to news around the crisis effort, you have some information around Ford stepping up around respirators.
That's right. So there have been reports. This news came actually from the UAW Local 600, which apparently leaked this information on their Facebook page out to their members. And they were saying that basically Ford is in a hurry to find volunteer UAW members to staff its Flat Rock assembly plant down in Flat Rock, which is where they normally build the Ford Mustang and the Lincoln Continental. But now they're going to set up a production line to help build respirators for healthcare providers and first responders and so forth. From what information we've been able to glean, they're looking to fill 3 shifts. I should mention also that Ford has not confirmed this, but they have confirmed earlier. They have announced plans more recently to do this kind of thing, to build ventilators at one of its Michigan plants. But they're apparently, according to the UAW, looking to staff 3 shifts to build kind of a quickly designed ventilator. This is going to use it's a interesting solution that they've come up with here. They're using a lot of off the shelf parts like a fan from the seats of the F-150 that normally heats and cools the seats in the F-150 pickup truck. Some air filters from 3M, and some 3D printed parts and sub-assemblies that they're all going to be using to make these respirators. They're also going to use like a hood that its employees use in the paint shops in their assembly plants to help filter. And it's going to be a waist-mounted unit. So we don't know anything yet about the production numbers because, Ford, again, hasn't confirmed this, but it is apparently all moving very quickly. And it's part of Ford's efforts. We talked about their plans to start building ventilators at its Rawsonville components plant near Ypsilanti yesterday on the show. Ford, like GM, is gearing up quickly to get in on this coronavirus response. And Jer, I'd like to just kind of add here that I've been covering this story a lot, and it's really been kind of remarkable how the auto industry has jumped into service to try to help out with the response to the coronavirus. At the risk of sounding like a homer, the Detroit automakers, and really the entire auto industry, because you're seeing this much of the same thing in Europe and other parts of the world from other automakers, but focusing on the Detroit companies, my hat really goes off to them because I think it's really impressive what they're doing. By every account that I've been reading, they're really jumping to action, working incredibly quickly around the clock in many cases. I read a story about the work GM's doing with this ventilator company out in Washington State that it's working with, about how they sent engineers and manufacturing experts out to India to try to unlock a plant shutdown there to get necessary components to make these ventilators. I mean, just going above and beyond. And we talked about it before on the show, Jared, that the industry has a history. Obviously, we're the arsenal of democracy. That's the name that we were given because of how the big 3 retooled to basically help manufacture aircraft engines, tanks, military jeeps, everything to fight World War II and defeat Adolf Hitler, right? So now it's sort of becoming the arsenal of health, and there's also precedent for that too. Ford has a history of making the iron lungs to help out with polio victims. Back in the day, GM has a long history of inventing important medical devices too. So I mean, it's just really impressive, and it's a story that I think a lot of the rest of the country maybe doesn't quite realize. But I think really highlights the importance not only of the domestic auto industry, but also like the critical importance, I would argue, of having a domestic manufacturing capacity and ability to build things.
All right, and we are done for today. Before I let you go, a reminder that today is Census Day, in case you haven't filled it out yet. I've done it myself. It only takes a few minutes, and it matters a lot no matter what community that you live in that you're hearing this show. Thanks to Jeffrey, who joined us as a member at patreon.com/dailydetroit. It's a big deal and makes a big difference in keeping this show going in this time where sponsorship has literally dried up. Not just for us, but for media that covers the crisis across the nation. With that, I'm Jer Stays. Take care of each other, and we'll get through this together.